You know, the original saga was about the father, the children, and the grandchildren. And I mean, that's not a secret to anybody. It's even in the novels.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
All the books that I ever used for Star Wars for reference, they're all still on my shelf. It's simply not going to be the case, though, that the existence of a book like Star Wars Kenobi would be a roadblock to doing something else in that time period with that character in that position, should they find a reason to do it.
Ewan?
Yes?
Are you going to play Obi-Wan Kenobi again?
Yes. I read the novel that was written about called Obi-Wan Kenobi, but I read it after we shot this series. I don't know, because I enjoyed playing him so much again, and I read it after. It's not the story that we use for our series, so but I like that. I like the way that he's written that story.
Hello there.
Hello there.
Hello there and welcome to the channel. I'd like to take some time to talk about the Kenobi novel by John Jackson Miller. Wait, where is it? So this novel was first announced at New York Comic Con in 2012, just a few months before the Disney purchase was announced. It was then released on the 27th of August 2013 and is now regarded as Legends. So first of all, let's take a listen to what the author has to say about this beloved novel.
Kenobi, it is a book that we did not know how well it would go over because it was not a typical Star Wars novel. We did not have any lightsaber fights. We did not have any space battles in it. It was really more of a Western, and 90% of it was told from the point of view of other characters.
You know, we do get to see inside his mind for a time in this book, and yeah, he's struggling with a lot of different things. He's certainly got the end of the Republic to deal with, the end of the Jedi Order to deal with. He's got this new mission to deal with of basically waiting and watching over Luke Skywalker. But he's also got a lot of personal issues involved here. You know, very simply, how he lives or how he's going to live out in this place. You know, he has survival skills as any Jedi has, but every place is different. How emotionally is he going to cope with this kind of isolation when he's been at the center of events for so long? He certainly is able to, through his interactions with the characters in this novel, I think he's really able to draw some insights and things that he's going to put to use, not just the practical things about living on Tatooine, but also how he's going to cope with living so far from anywhere and be happy. Whether he can be happy again is obviously an open question, but he certainly has to be at least at peace with himself and with his mission, because he does not know when this story starts how long he's going to be here.
Miller also wrote a short story prequel to the book called Incognito for Star Wars Insider, which appeared in the paperback version later. Now let's take a listen at some of the source material he utilised for inspiration.
As far as what I drew upon, certainly we had the background that came in from Dark Lord by James Luceno, where you have the epilogue at the end, where Ben Kenobi learns of Darth Vader's existence. With the exception of the prologue, the entire Kenobi novel takes place during one sentence on page 110 of The Life and Legend of Obi-Wan Kenobi. I drew a lot from the West End guides that they did for the role-playing game.
Miller also understood that from a canon standpoint, Obi-Wan and Vader couldn't meet in this time frame, and he also couldn't communicate with Qui-Gon Jinn.
We really cannot have
Obi-Wan Kenobi running off everywhere, you really do not want to have a whole lot of different villains chasing him to Tatooine. If he's in exile, as he is now, we kind of need to treat it like an exile. If he's in hiding, we need to treat it as if he's in hiding. There are opportunities for change and growth that we do take advantage of for him here. We also know that the really big changes are not in the cards. We know that he's not going to run off in the next year or 2 or 5 or 10 and defeat Darth Vader and the Emperor. It's gonna be a while. The other thing about Qui-Gon, yes, that is a canon issue. It is established that he was not actually able to get a response from Qui-Gon until later on, after he knows who Darth Vader is. So that's already out there. But it still works as a meditation, and it still solves the purpose that was intended.
In the prologue, we start out with Obi-Wan looking for directions to the Lars homestead. In meditation to Qui-Gon Jinn, he says, "We removed one child from Tatooine as Galaxy's hope, and now we return one with the same goal."
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
We're introduced to Ayark, who's the Tusken clan leader. We learn that Sand People are given the name Tusken Raiders after raiding Fort Tusken. Tuskens often replenish their numbers by kidnapping, and it's implied that when a Tusken's severely injured, they're required to kill themselves. They've got no time to mourn their unworthy kin. The Sand People have to survive today, because death is behind them like the shadows to a bantha. There's a hooded human who's been spotted riding an Opie across the desert alone, and Ayark wants to kill the intruder. Ayark is also known as Plug Eye by Oren Galt. Oren Galt is a moisture farmer and an entrepreneur. He's trying to get the locals to subscribe to a settlers call fund for protection by using fake crate dragon calls to signal for help against the Tuskens. When doing research for this video, I learned that John Jackson Miller had the actor Sam Neill in mind when he was writing this character. Oren's children are Mullen and Vika, who are very unsympathetic people. The Galt family are close to the Caldwell family, consisting of Annalene, as well as her children Callie and Jabe. Annalene's husband's deceased, and she runs his store, the Danner's Claim, where you can find what you need. Callie's Jewback runs wild and almost takes her into a Sarlacc pit. A hooded stranger joins the chase. Obi-Wan introduces himself as Ben, and the Opie is named Rue. So I'll be referring to him as Ben from this point on. Annalene says that most people call her Annie.
Little Annie!
Ayark saw Ben levitate the Jewback so it wouldn't crush Annalene after she fell from it. So he thinks that she has the power, which makes her the new target. We learn that Ben's living in the Junkland Wastes, which is also referred to in the Dark Lord book. He's also avoiding contact with Bail Organa. A Jawa sandcrawler arrives at Annalene's store, and she threatens to shoot anyone that wants to trade with them on her property. There's a really funny moment where Jabe's harassing a Jawa and he chases it onto the ramp. He gets a scare when he runs into Ben, who looks like a giant Jawa in a brown robe. Callie has been telling everyone about Ben saving her. She's really excitable and exaggerates. Of course, Ben's given vague answers to questions about him. We learn that Oren has feelings for Annalene, but he was married when she started working at Danner's Claim. By the time his wife left him, Annalene was married to Danner. Oren tells Ben that Tatooine's hiding its water, but it's the tastiest water that anyone's ever had. We get mention that the Tuskens kidnapped the wife of Clegg Lars. Ben sits and stares at Anakin's lightsaber, wondering what he could have done to help him. This reflects what's stated in the Dark Lord novel, where he said, "Had he been right to let Anakin die there? Could he have been redeemed?" These questions plagued and pained him. Watching over Anakin's son was his reason for living. The Sand People call Annalene the Enagrosh, which means the Air Shaper. Ayark knew a Force user who willingly joined the Tuskens. Tuskens are so single-minded that a little coordination is necessary. It's stated that if you don't keep your hood up or wear a hat, the sun will dry your skin and make you look older. Annalene's obviously been wondering what Ben did in his past life, but she realises that he wasn't a cook, but he tried. He says, "I didn't try, I did," and he tells her that he had a friend who owned a diner.
Obi-Wan! Hello, Dex.
During a Tusken attack on the Claim, Wiley Ulbricht fends them off alone inside the store, Ben ignites his lightsaber, but only blue light and blaster fire can be seen on the surveillance camera. Ben then gives Wiley all the credit to avoid suspicion. We learn that Yark is a female. She's the mother of Adine, who was killed in the raid. Ben and Annalene return his body. Yark sees Ben's lightsaber hilt and remembers one from years earlier. Her adopted sister Kashyyyk had married Sharad Het, the Jedi who had joined the Tuskens years earlier. The losses in the raid had been bad, but they were nothing compared to the day the clan battled the Hutts, the day Sharad Het died. Tuskens repopulated by a time-honoured tradition, abduction. There's some background on Het joining the clan. He had a son with Kashyyyk named Asherad. After the battle with Jabba, Sharad was dead and his son vanished. If you'd like some more information on those characters, I'd like to recommend the OG Star Wars channel, which recently did a couple of live streams going into more detail. The Tuskens didn't train, they learned in combat. They could die before they learned anything. Yark wants to use something that Ben cares about as leverage to make him join the Tuskens. In Meditation to Qui-Gon, Ben reveals that he doesn't like standing by and doing nothing, and he didn't like the side he saw to Oran Goat when they led the posse to massacre the Tuskens. Callie learns Kenobi's name. She was spying on him when he was meditating. Tuskens are wrapped at birth. They can't change or clean the wrappings. They add to them as they grow, and even if a pebble gets stuck, they just layer over it and endure the pain. Ben states that for many people, smaller struggles are just as important as the larger ones are for us. Oren sends Annalene and her kids to Mos Eisley to get a brand new land speeder. Ben's also headed there so he can avoid the claim, but his Opie is pregnant, so he goes with them. Talking with Annalene about Jabe joining in on the massacre of the Tuskens, he says that when people show you signs, it's important to read them. They then see a figure who looks like a clone trooper, but their armour looks different.
Move along.
They notice Owen Lars and his wife, who have a new baby. They want to call them over, so Ben uses the Force to make the speeder move from the area. They spot Oren being taken into a building. He says, "I have important business to discuss with Jabba the Hutt." Instead of Jabba, he's faced with Mosib Benid, who does the talking for Jabba when Jabba's not around.
My favorite really obscure character who was sort of in the movie was the fake Jabba, again, that I saw in that very first batch of comics that I got, where they had shot a stand-in for Jabba in case he appeared in Mos Eisley. And Howard Chaykin was just told to draw a random alien there, which then became Jabba for the comics. He sort of, I think he was a Nimbinel. He looked like sort of a mandrill or a monkey or something like that. We jokingly refer to him as Monkey Jabba. After the real Jabba shows up, and of course we realize that's not him, and kind of this fun EU way of explaining who he was. And, it came out of the role-playing game books that West End did. The notion became, all right, he wasn't Jabba, he was Jabba's accountant. And he would just go places and he would, speak for Jabba, use Jabba's name. And so I decided to put him in the Kenobi novel.
Oren's then given an ultimatum to pay back the money he owes to Jabba, but presently is to be tortured. Chapter 33 in its entirety has Obi-Wan rescuing Oren from being tortured without being seen. It's really cool the way it's written. It has him kind of behaving a bit like Batman, for lack of a better example. Oren asks Annalene to marry him, but she wants to know what Ben has to say about it because she thinks there could be something between them. He's obviously a bit reserved, and she knows something's happened. She says to him that this bad thing that happened to someone you care about, it happened to you too.
You were my brother, Anakin! I loved you!
Chapter 35 as a whole is fantastic. The entire exchange between Annalene and Ben is really beautifully written. Ben reflects on his past. He says the Jedi was like a family. He had many brothers and sisters and fathers and mothers, and even a strange little green uncle.
Oh dude, I'm out of beer. That's a lot of foam there, Jawa. Thank you, now go.
That segment was directed by Dave Filoni. The continuity errors give it away. A desperate Oren, his children, and Jabe pretend to be Tusken Raiders to scare wily Ulbrich and his wife. Ben protects them and Oren tries to kill him twice. Oren abandons Jabe and Ben when Tuskens attack. Oren planned to marry Anneline to own half of Donner's claim as collateral to pay back the bank, and then her savings to pay back Jabba. He's ruined his own life and now he's trying to take hers as well. Anneline rejects him, so he offers to marry Callie. Anneline hits him and then he attacks her. Callie puts an end to it by shooting a laser blast beside him, and only then does he reveal that Jabe is dead. Back with Ben and Jabe, Ayark actually references Anakin's slaughters of the Tuskens. It's revealed that Oren's done this before. He likes to antagonize the Tuskens, so they attack. Ben really wants to help them. Jabe returns home and Oren sets out to dispose of Ben, as he's the only other person that knows what actually happened. So all this time Oren's been embezzling money through the Settlers' Call Fund, and that worked pretty well for him up until Anakin slaughtered the Tuskens, which made them stop their attacks. So the locals weren't paying as much, and so Oren staged the attacks so they'd keep paying him. One doesn't need unlimited power to create victims. He tells Anneline regarding Oren that the order in our lives can simply vanish, sometimes because we're not diligent, sometimes it's just no one's fault. Oren proclaims to everyone that Ben is the traitor and leads a posse to kill him. Ayark reveals that there was another massacre, mighty warriors wiped away, women and children too. Ben says, settlers don't kill children, do they?
And not just the men, but the women. And the children, too. They're like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals. I hate them!
The Sand People's confidence wasn't the only victim of that event. Sometimes it takes losing everything to find your true path. This time, a real Krayt Dragon attacks, and Oren witnesses Ben use the Force to halt rubble midair and wield a lightsaber, also defeating the Krayt Dragon. It's pretty epic. Oren then threatens to tell the Empire. Ben doesn't kill him because he already knows where his decisions will lead him, after several warnings to just turn back. Oren tries to kill Ayark with his speeder, and is presumed dead when he crashes. Oren wakes up from the crash. He thinks he's in a bacta tank somewhere, but he's actually covered in Tusken wrappings. His legs are broken and he's expected to provide water for the Tuskens with a stolen evaporator until his death. When I read this, it was like, first of all, unexpected and also really upsetting. Like, I genuinely loved the character up until it was revealed what he'd been doing the whole time. And then to see that outcome, it obviously parallels what happened to Anakin becoming Darth Vader. It's really just that warning not to give in to fear and selfishness and greed and to become something that you're not, just become a really evil person. Just to know that there's always time to turn back and do the right thing. But Oren just kept persisting, and like Anakin, he met his demise. Oren vowed never to speak again, whereas Anakin got his redemption, so I guess that's where they differ. We know that Anneline wanted to explore, and Obi-Wan sends her application to the Alderaan University system for exobiology expeditions, launching from their nearest branch in Naboo. So at least she won't blow up on Alderaan. She's wondering how this is all possible. He tells her, let's just say you have a strong reference in Alderaan. Obviously Ben can't go with them, and he actually tells Annie that there's a child that he's responsible for. Up until this point, she's been really gutted that they can't be together, but she says, you lied to me. And he's like, yeah, I suppose I did. She says, I don't need that, not anymore. I feel sad for you, Ben, goodbye. That burst me a bit. I was like, I just want them both to be happy. But then upon leaving, Anneline comes to the realization that Ben isn't staying on Tatooine because he wants to, but he thinks he has to, just like she did with looking after her dead husband's store all those years. Ben finally comes to terms with his mission and his situation, and it's time to go home. This book is phenomenal, and if you're someone like me that really does not enjoy Disney Star Wars and what they tried to do with this story, read the book. You'll be able to compartmentalize that story from this one, and this will replace what you think happens, what does happen with Obi-Wan between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. And it's a beautiful, beautiful story, and you will not be disappointed. Before we conclude, I'd like to show a couple of sources that show just what John Jackson Miller thought about the EU as canon, and then a clip about how he talks about it after the Disney purchase.
We had gone through this process, and I'd had a conference call with what turned out to be the Lucasfilm Story Group as this book is developing. And then I'm 2/3 of the way through, and they say, "Hey, we need you to come out to Lucasfilm because you're going to end up doing a video with." As it turned out, Timothy Zahn was there, and we ended up doing a video about declaring everything prior to A New Dawn Legends, and everything forward is part of the Lucasfilm Story Group era, so to speak. But basically, what it means now is that there are people in the story group that have an eye on everything that is going on in other parts of the franchise, films, TV, other things, toys, action figure, the backs of the cards even, the video games. They have all these things that they're aware of, and so they can actually cue us into opportunities and things to avoid. And that is something that did happen before. But this is a little bit more structured, I would say.
So uncivilized.
With that in mind, keep reading your EU, keep sharing real Star Wars, and lang may your lum reek.
You want to go home and rethink your life?
I want to go home and rethink my life.
Star Wars Kenobi is a novel that was released in the United States in 2013. It was really a labor of love for me. It is very much a Western. Obviously, there were Western influences in the original Star Wars movies. This is about Obi-Wan's early days on Tatooine before he really knew what it was like to live out in the middle of nowhere and live basically as a pioneer, miles and miles from anybody or anything. It is about Obi-Wan as he's trying to decide how he should live following the end of the Clone Wars. He knows that he has to protect Luke Skywalker, but he doesn't know how long he's going to be stuck on Tatooine doing that. And he also would like to build a life for himself if possible. He is concerned about the local people that he meets. There are dangers on Tatooine with the Sand People and Jabba the Hutt and all the other dangers that are out there. And he very much wants to try to be a Jedi again. But that conflicts with his central purpose of being on the planet, which is to protect Luke Skywalker, to protect the New Hope. Obi-Wan very much feels as if he represents the hope that failed, and this is a sad chapter beginning in his life, and he's trying to figure out how best to deal with it. We see Obi-Wan through the eyes of the other locals on Tatooine who are wondering what he's doing there. The woman who runs the local general store, the big local landowner who is concerned about the stranger and why he's come to Tatooine. Also a chieftain of the Tusken Raiders. We get to see the world through the eyes of the Tusken Raiders for the first time. And we also get to see Obi-Wan struggling with what has happened in his past through a series of meditations where he's trying to talk to his former master Qui-Gon Jinn. Trying to find the correct path for himself.
Another happy landing.